that Greenland sticks together in these times, the Greenlandic people and the Greenlandic spirit, and how we are to move as a nation together right now is more important than ever. We can still have disagreements on different issues internally, but in international politics, importantly, we support each other.
We are the owners of this land, and we should run it ourselves.
We don't want to be a part of US, and they should leave us alone.
President Trump is turning up the heat on Greenland while weighing in on Venezuela as well. Two international flashpoints, obviously, drawing global attention. NBC's Monica Alba tells us what's happening now with both situations.
And I may do that for Greenland, too. I may put a tariff on countries if they don't go along with Greenland, because we need Greenland for national security. So I may do that. I'll give you a little, I'll take you out of that. In fact, that'll end up being the story. But actually, this is a much bigger story because we're reducing healthcare by numbers that you haven't seen. So I spoke to the top.
Greenland needs to be viewed as our ally, not as an asset.
This wasn't a negotiation. It was a refusal. Greenland has just pushed back against U.S. pressure, and the response wasn't diplomacy. It was economic warning shots. For decades, Greenland sat quietly on the world map, remote, frozen, overlooked. Now it's at the center of a power struggle involving resources, security, and who gets to decide the future of the Arctic. This isn't about land. It's about leverage and why a small territory just told a superpower no for most of modern history. Greenland was treated as a geographic afterthought, an immense ice-covered landmass defined more by maps than by markets. It rarely featured in global power conversations. That invisibility created a false sense of stability. That era is over. Greenland now sits at the intersection of three forces reshaping global politics: resource scarcity, strategic geography, and economic competition. When pressure was applied and Greenland resisted, it wasn't defiance for drama. It was a signal that the old assumptions no longer apply. To understand why, you need to look beneath the ice literally and strategically. As Arctic ice melts, access changes, shipping routes shorten, mineral deposits become reachable. Strategic positioning in the Arctic becomes decisive rather than symbolic. Greenland, once peripheral, suddenly occupies a central role in the world's emerging northward expansion, and global powers noticed. Pressure didn't arrive all at once. It built gradually, framed as cooperation, investment, and strategic alignment. But at its core was a simple objective: secure influence before rivals do. Influence over territory, influence over resources, influence over future access. Greenland's leadership understood the stakes. Accepting pressure would have meant tying long-term decisions to external priorities, often with limited flexibility once contracts, security arrangements, and economic dependencies lock in. Rejecting it, on the other hand, meant risk, economic consequences, political friction, and uncertainty. They chose the risk. That choice is what makes this moment disruptive. Greenland's resistance challenges a long-standing dynamic where smaller territories are expected to accommodate larger powers, especially when strategic value suddenly rises. Instead, Greenland treated the pressure as negotiable, not inevitable. That reframing matters, because pressure only works when compliance is assumed. When economic signals and warnings followed the rejection, it confirmed something even more important. Leverage was being tested in real time. Economic tools, trade access, investment signals, market influence are now the frontline instruments of persuasion. This isn't new globally, but it's new for Greenland. Economic threats don't always arrive as sanctions. Often, they appear as slowed investment, delayed approvals, or signals to capital markets that risk has increased. The effect is the same: costs rise, options narrow, and pressure intensifies without formal confrontation. Greenland's response suggests it anticipated this. The decision to push back wasn't made in ignorance of consequences. It was made with the understanding that sovereignty today isn't just political, it's economic. Control over resources, partnerships, and long-term development paths determines how resilient a territory is under pressure, and Greenland's resources are precisely what's driving the urgency. Rare earth minerals, critical for modern technology. Strategic minerals essential to clean energy transitions. Potential energy corridors and Arctic shipping relevance. These aren't speculative assets, they're foundational to future economic and security planning. Control over them translates into leverage. That's why pressure escalated quickly when resistance appeared. What's striking is how quietly this unfolded. No dramatic speeches, no televised standoffs, just a firm policy position followed by economic signaling. That quiet escalation is often more consequential than public disputes because it reflects planning rather than posturing. Behind the scenes, calculations shifted. Markets assess political risk instantly. Investors watch government signals closely. When economic threats emerge, they ripple outward, affecting financing conditions, insurance costs, and development timelines. For a territory managing growth carefully, these pressures are real. Yet Greenland didn't reverse course. That persistence changes the narrative. It suggests the decision wasn't reactive, it was strategic. This moment also exposes a broader global shift. As great powers compete more openly, smaller states and territories are no longer passive arenas. They're active negotiators. They understand that competition creates options, and options create leverage. Saying no doesn't close doors, it reshapes the terms on which doors open. Greenland's stance signals to all external actors that engagement must align with local priorities, not just external urgency. That message reverberates beyond the Arctic. It raises uncomfortable questions. If Greenland can resist, what about other strategically placed regions? If economic threats don't secure compliance, how effective are they long-term? And if pressure accelerates resistance rather than submission, does it backfire? These questions are being studied carefully. What makes Greenland's situation especially complex is its balance between autonomy and external relationships. Managing that balance under pressure requires discipline. Every move now is interpreted not just locally, but globally. The rejection marked a line, the economic response tested it, and the outcome remains unresolved. What's clear is that this isn't a one-off dispute. It's part of a larger pattern where strategic assets are becoming contested spaces and local decision-makers are asserting agency earlier rather than later. Greenland didn't wait for leverage to disappear before acting. That timing is critical. Because once commitments are signed and dependencies entrenched, reversing course becomes exponentially harder. Greenland acted while options were still open, accepting short-term pressure to preserve long-term control. That's a calculated trade. As economic pressure escalates, the next phase won't be decided by rhetoric. It will be decided by resilience, by whether Greenland can maintain momentum, attract diversified partnerships, and manage the costs of resistance without compromising its objectives. When pressure fails publicly, it doesn't disappear. It changes form. After Greenland rejected outside demands, the response shifted away from open persuasion and toward economic signaling, the quiet, calibrated tools modern power prefers. These tools don't arrive with announcements. They arrive through markets, investment flows, and strategic hesitation. That's where the real pressure begins. Economic leverage works by narrowing choices. Access becomes conditional. Capital becomes cautious. Partnerships become reconsidered. The objective isn't immediate collapse, it's gradual compliance, and this pressure is often invisible to the public. Foreign investors suddenly hesitate, infrastructure funding slows, development projects face delays framed as technical reviews, risk premiums increase. None of it looks like retaliation, but all of it raises the cost of independence. Greenland understands this dynamic. That's why the refusal wasn't emotional, it was anticipatory. Officials knew that the real contest would unfold quietly, through numbers rather than statements. They also knew something else. Economic pressure is most effective when a target has no alternatives, so alternatives became the priority. Rather than leaning on a single external partner, Greenland began emphasizing diversification, political, economic, and strategic. This doesn't mean severing ties. It means ensuring that no single actor can dictate outcomes by pulling one lever. In today's global system, diversification is defense. That's especially true in the Arctic. As competition intensifies, every power wants access, but none want instability. That creates a paradox. Too much pressure risks pushing Greenland toward other partners, while restraint risks losing influence altogether. This limits how far threats can go. What makes Greenland's position stronger than many expect is timing. The Arctic is entering a period of long-term strategic importance. No major power wants to be excluded permanently. That reality constrains escalation. Economic pressure, therefore, must remain reversible, and reversibility weakens leverage. At the same time, Greenland's leadership is keenly aware that symbolism alone won't sustain resistance. Sovereignty must be supported by governance capacity. Decisions must be credible. Commitments must be reliable. This is where the outcome will be decided. If Greenland demonstrates consistency, clear rules, transparent partnerships, and long-term planning, pressure will lose effectiveness. Markets adapt to clarity faster than they adapt to threats. But if uncertainty creeps in, pressure regains power. That's the balance Greenland is now managing. Behind closed doors, negotiations haven't stopped. They've evolved. Pressure and resistance coexist with dialogue. That's how modern power struggles function, not as binary conflicts, but as layered negotiations where leverage is constantly tested. What's changed is the assumption of inevitability. Greenland has shown that compliance is no longer automatic, and once that assumption is gone, pressure becomes a weaker tool. This moment also sends a message beyond Greenland. Other small but strategically placed regions are watching closely. They're observing whether resistance leads to isolation or to renegotiation. The result will influence how future pressure campaigns are designed. Because power today isn't just about who is strongest, it's about who has option. This story isn't really about Greenland. It's about a world where pressure no longer guarantees obedience and where economic threats don't always produce predictable outcomes. Greenland's refusal marks a shift in how leverage operates. It shows that even small players can create space by acting early, understanding their value, and refusing to negotiate from fear. The escalation that followed reveals something else. Pressure works best when applied quietly, but it works least when the target is prepared. That's the lesson global powers are absorbing now. The Arctic isn't just a frontier, it's a testing ground for a new balance of power, and Greenland, long treated as peripheral, has placed itself at the center of that test. Whether it holds that position depends on what comes next, not headlines, not rhetoric, but resilience. Because in the modern world, saying no is only the beginning. What matters is whether you can afford to keep saying it.